Morning, guys. Just back from terrorizing the neighborhood looking for hobbits and stuff.
Is it coffee? Oh, okay. And you haven't seen any hobbits around, have you? Not today, no. Okay. Thanks. Yeah, I've just seen property for sale. Bag End. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, I didn't see a floor plan.
Bit depressing, really. Nowhere to be found. Don't know what to say.
Excuse me, mate. You haven't seen any hobbits around, have you? Get
Anyway, I might as well go out to the hobby shed and make a project.
Hey guys, welcome back to Not One Videos and welcome to my new hobby shed. You have no idea how good it feels to say those words. And as you can see from the ridiculous intro, I am already having so much fun just being able to make content again. A huge thanks to my friends Andrew and Max for helping me out with the skits at the beginning. If you're ever in London and need a place to eat, be sure to check out Rubio Cafe in Harlesden. I find them especially good for second breakfast. In this video, I'm actually tackling a build that I have done before, Weathertop, also known as the Great Watchtower of Amon Sul. But this time I'm going to be doing it in 10mm scale, and I'm also going to try and be far more screen accurate to the movies than last time.
This was the Great Watchtower of Amon Sul. We shall rest here tonight.
But straight off the bat, once I had the base cut and textured, I met my first challenge: how to make 5 points on a circle. Yeah, well, in previous iterations of my channel, I probably would have tried to be clever and film myself figuring out different angles and using protractors and compass, etc. But I just can't be bothered, so I cheated and found a circle with 5 points on Google, traced the image off the screen and then transferred these markings onto my diorama base. Simple but effective and a ton of time saved, which is great because this project is a collab with a deadline and I'm already sorely running out of time. And let's take a very quick sidestep to explain why. This whole 10mm scale diorama idea is actually part of a collab / challenge that was laid down by John over at Macc's Armies of Middle-earth. And when I was invited, I jumped in with 2 feet with the mission to create a 10mm scale diorama of the Army of the Dead and the 3 hunters in that famous scene where all the skulls start pouring out of the ruins. I actually spent a whole week rescaling some Army of the Dead scans that John had sent me and trying to print off a build plate full of 10mm scale minis, but to no avail. For some reason, the prints kept failing, and the best that I ever got was one individual mini standing strong for the Army of the Dead, and there was no way I was going to print the army 1 mini at a time.
Just one. I have no clue why. Maybe if I print them with supports? I don't know.
It turns out that my minis were sticking to the FEP in the vat, and with a week already wasted, it was very clear that a change of tact and a change of diorama was in order. And that is where the awesome Varus miniatures come into play. Adam from 3D Games and Wargamming recommended getting in touch with Florian, and I am so glad I did. He has a whole section on his site called the Shire and Beyond, full of the Lord of the Rings themed miniatures in 10mm scale. I mean, just check out these awesome Gandalf vs Balrog minis. I was almost tempted to do this diorama instead, but with the channel starting to move again, I thought revisiting one of my early successes was far more fitting with Weathertop. Florian has a full set of Nazgûl in various recognisable poses from the Weathertop scene, alongside hobbits both individually and as a foursome huddled together. And of course Aragorn brandishing his sword and the torch. All of the minis are beautifully sculpted and I couldn't wait to print them off. But we'll get to that a little later in the video. Let's get back to crafting Weathertop. With the 5 points figured out on my base, I was now able to start installing the walls of the ruins and attempt to capture one of my favourite scenes in the whole of the Lord of the Rings movie franchise. And of course, as always, I am using traditional XPS foam modelling techniques. One of my favourite things about Weathertop as a scene to build from scratch is that it's a very forgiving piece of scenery for the average model builder to recreate. Ruins don't really require any specialist tools. The vast majority of the time you're carefully breaking pieces of foam, and if you've got a pencil, a sharp hobby knife, some XPS foam, some wood glue and pins, you're good to go. Although I will say it does take a keen eye to pick up on defining details, especially if you're trying to match what you see on screen. My top tip of all of this is wood glue and pins. For some reason, wood glue and XPS foam is a match made in heaven, blowing your standard PVA out of the water. The bond is better, the drying time is better, everything is just better. And the use of pins just means that you don't have to wait for segments to dry before moving on with your build. The pins hold things securely in place and you can follow through to completion in some cases. So yeah, if you're new to crafting, invest in some wood glue and sewing pins. That's sewing pins, not sewing needles, just to be clear. You can see here in my video that I'm using several different colours of foam, white foam, black foam, pink foam, but it's all pretty much the same stuff, XPS. They do have slightly different densities from each other, but over the years I've come to the realisation that it doesn't really matter. So don't worry too much about the colour of your XPS foam. This foam, however, is a completely different beast altogether, commonly known as PIR foam. This is roof insulation foam, and I never use this stuff to make buildings or ruins, but it is perfect for modelling terrain. It does come with a warning though: never try using this stuff with a hot wire, and certainly don't combust it. The fumes from this are toxic, but in terms of carving and breaking etc., as long as you are careful not to breathe it in, you are good to go. And it really does make excellent terrain building material, as it is so easy to carve with your average hobby knife. On that note, one of the things that I've always wondered about Weathertop in the movies is just how did they get up there? It was never really clear from the screenshots, so I imagined a roughly hewn staircase and carved it into the foam, thus appeasing my nagging need for this piece of terrain to not just look good, but to also be somewhat possible to ascend. In my mind, the staircase leads to the ledge where the hobbits have their little campfire and give away their location to the Nazgûl, and you can see in the background of this scene that there is a door in the face of the cliff. This is how the hobbits make their final ascent into the courtyard at the top as they flee in fear. So I decided to make this a dual focus diorama and recreate this scene as well. With the basic structure of the terrain almost complete, it was time to give it some stratified rock texture that would start to bring about that realism. This is one of my absolute favourite techniques to use on PIR foam. Using a stiff brush, and hey presto, you have the perfect rock face effect. You could just paint your terrain at this point, but if you really want to add that realism, then it's time to make your own fine texture paste. And for this I used some leftover grey tile grout, some wood glue and a dash of water just to make the mixture run a little more smoothly. Once I had the texture paste ready, I simply painted it all over the terrain with an old brush, brushing in the same direction as the stratified rock texture I achieved and making sure to get the paste into all of the nooks and crannies. I then glued my ruins onto the top of the terrain with some hot glue and then used some texture paste all over the ruins so as to tie the whole model together. And with the model coming together nicely, I started to think it was time to reattempt printing some minis, which I was a tad nervous about, considering my previous failures. Okay, so I've got some ring wraiths and some hobbits printing. Hopefully this works and we can get on with making a cool diorama for this 10mm challenge. Okay, let's check and see. Yes, looks like they've all printed nicely. Just pop them off the build plate. So I'm leaving them on the supports because if I didn't leave them on the supports, the models are so tiny that they go through the grate. Into the dip they go. And then we're going to break off all of the supports before we cure them
it's going to be easier to get the supports off. They're so small that I just broke the first hobbit off its base. That's annoying. Got to be a little bit more careful. So Florian from Various Miniatures did actually warn me that with miniatures this small, that the standard photopolymer resin from Elegoo might be a bit too brittle, and I guess he was right. So I'm just going to have to be super careful. The upside is I just have to put these on a diorama. They're not actually for gaming. These models from Various Miniatures are absolutely awesome looking. The detail on them is fantastic, even at this tiny scale. They've been designed for 10mm, so they look really, really good.
Whoops.
How awesome is that? I'm really excited about this diorama now. It's hard enough to film things at 28mm scale, let alone 10mm scale. Right, let's make a diorama.
Okay, so I said my terrain structure was almost complete, but it is missing one very important detail, and that is these ancient Numenorian statues, which for my money are extremely important for selling the scene. And for these I called on the aid of my friend Dave from Kit Bash Box. Dave has made some incredible minis, and he created these statues for his printable Amon Hen terrain, but they fit perfectly for Amon Sul, aka Weathertop. Once again, I left the statues on the supports so they didn't fall through the basket while washing. I then cured the minis and they were ready to give a very quick paint job with some black primer and some basic grey dry brushing. The reason I chose to print 3 statues was to have 2 standing on plinths in the courtyard and 1 to be butchered into a pile of statue ruins, and who knows what happened to the other 2 statues with the passage of time. I then glued them all into place using a little super glue. With the rocks, statues and stone in order, it was time to attend to that which twists and breaks the rock with the passage of time, vines and trees. I asked my daughter to find a nice pile of twigs when we were at the park, and she managed to pick the perfect pile for this scale of model. I did spend quite a bit of time flitting backwards and forwards in the footage of the films to see the best placement for these. It isn't exactly perfect, but it's close enough to pass. And once they were all glued in place, it was time to paint the terrain. Although this time I'm not using paint. I am jumping straight to the washes. With the grey tile grout as my base, I figured that the washes might take well to the terrain, and boy am I glad that I decided to try this out. Although I did add the washes a little heavy-handedly, in the end it worked out perfectly. Once the washes were down, I simply went back over the terrain with some light grey dry brushing just to bring out those highlights, and I was extremely happy with the result. Pleased with the paint job, I moved into the final phase of the terrain build, flocking and debris. For this, I really didn't want to overcomplicate things. At 10mm scale, you can get away with a very basic approach to flocking. I simply covered the whole model in glue and sprinkled on a mixture of light green static grass and fine foam flock. Then for the debris, I pasted on the glue and sprinkled on some base ready mix from Crowd Cover and sealed it into place using the Crowd Fixer glue. Then it was time for the electronics. Electronics? What on earth do you need electronics for, I hear you say? Well, the Hobbit's campfire, of course. I know this is a little overkill for this model, but I really can't help myself adding an LED wherever I can in a project. I'm kind of skimming over it here, but I give a full tutorial on how to do this basic circuit and make fire effect in the video in the top right hand corner of the screen. As it happens, it is my most popular video on my YouTube channel, so yeah, you should definitely check that out once you have watched all of the videos in this collab. And just to note, I get all of my electronic hobby supplies from Terraintronics, and I don't get paid to say that. They are just fantastic and I can't sing their praises more highly. But the fire is totally out of scale, I hear you say. Well, yeah, it is, but I decided to roll with the rule of cool, and if it looks cool, then just do it. Who cares that the fire will be pretty much the same size as a hobbit and not just a tiny flickering flame? I then finished the whole thing off with a few pebbles glued into place around the campfire.
Okay, so I'm extremely pleased with how this project is going so far. We're not quite there yet, but it is high time that I introduce you to the other collaborators in the project and the awesome projects that they have been doing.
Straight off the bat we have John, who's the brains and instigator behind this whole challenge. I'm not going to show you any of his pics or footage, but he's coming in strong with a 10mm scale Osgiliath battle diorama. I've seen it, it's awesome, make sure to check it out. Then we have Sean from Timeless Tabletop Gaming giving us a beautiful 10mm scale rendition of his favourite depiction of Smaug the dragon sitting on hordes of gold in the mountain of Erebor. Next up we have the master wizard himself, Hayden from the Wizard's Brush, with a highly detailed 10mm scale model of the town of Bree, with hobbits and more Nazgûl than you can shake a big stick at. And last but not least, by any stretch of the imagination, there is Adam from 3D Games, Wargamming and Terrain, with none other than Helm's Deep. Yes, you heard me right, Helm's Deep, and the chances are he is still working on it right now. And lastly, I have to give a shout out to my friend Wani. He did the cover of the Nazgûl theme, which you heard at the start of the video and which you're hearing right now. He does all these different covers of different shows like Skyrim, Game of Thrones, and they're all awesome. So you should definitely check them out. I will leave links to not only Wani, but all of the video contributions from my collaborators in the description below this video. So this is my palette of colours that I use to paint all of my 10mm scale hobbits and Aragorn. But being so used to painting at 28mm scale, I actually found this really challenging. The temptation is to add way more detail than you need, so I was straining my eyes just to get up close. But it turns out you really don't need that much detail at all. As long as you pick out the skin tones, hair colours, tunics and cloaks, the job is a good one. On the topic of painting minis, I was originally going to include my Nazgûl painting segment here, but I accidentally dropped it into the timeline at the start of the video and it just seemed to work. No need for continuity. Okay, hey guys, this is probably completely in the wrong timeline of this video somewhere, but I just wanted to give Florian from Various Miniatures another huge thank you because he has sorted me out with some specific models for the fire campsite scene where the hobbits don't have their swords out. I kind of cheekily asked him if that was possible and he was like, yep, no problem. So right now I'm about to print 4 little hobbits and they're going to be on my campfire part of the diorama.
The diorama is complete.
And here it is, my final Weathertop diorama at 10mm scale. I definitely think that I've improved on my 28mm scale attempt, but you can be the judge. Let me know in the comments below what you think. If you're not a member of my Patreon yet, please consider coming over and checking it out. The content ball is rolling once again, and the support I receive over there makes a huge difference, not just financially, but the moral support. And speaking of which, a massive thank you to everyone scrolling across the bottom of the screen right now. I'm really looking forward to our next Discord hobby hangout. And lastly, I can't finish this video without thanking my good friend Matt over the Dragon Workshop. He made the awesome Nazgûl costume that I've been wearing in this video. He's an absolute legend, he's got an amazing Instagram and he will make you some amazing stuff if you want him to, so go check him out. Link in the description below this video. Thanks for watching guys, I really hope you enjoyed the project and I'll see you in the next one.